okay. It's okay. It's all right. It's okay. A book fell. It's okay. Everybody's fine. Hi, readers. It's Lori. Welcome back to my channel, Books, Ink, and Paper, and welcome to the fun house with all of my sweet dogs. I have a new foster dog. Her name is Gracie. There she is. She's she's interesting. Gracie is. Okay. I have tried to film this video 3 times. This is my third attempt. And is it technology today? No, it is canines. It is canines. It is 2 of our dogs and our foster dog, and it's them. Okay, let's do this. Deep breath. Welcome to June's reading wrap up. I'm here to tell you about the challenges that I had in reading in the month of June and why they happened. So this whole video, generally speaking, if I don't watch it, will have a tone to it that I don't want. It wasn't a bad reading month, readers. It was just a challenging one for me. So let's talk about the only 4 books that I finished in the month of June. 4 books. Okay. One of them I didn't get to finish, but it's still on my list. I just talked about it in another video I filmed today. Is this one, my nonfiction pick from you. It's lovely. I'm gonna just enjoy it so much, but I just couldn't finish it in the month of June, so I'm carrying it over to finish it when I'm ready and to give it the attention that it requires and deserves. Readers, while I was editing, I realized that I could have shared something with you that I totally forgot, and that is that I have been steadily reading The Lincoln Highway this month by Amor Towles, and I'm at about 52% in. I've really made a good amount of progress in this book. I'm mostly listening to it, but I do have this physical copy as well. It is like if I went to sleep reading this, it would hurt if it fell in my head. But I'm really enjoying this. The reason I love the audiobook, and I have no regrets about buying the physical copy, but the reason I love this audiobook so much is because it is narrated by a number of different people. So it's more of a cast production than it is just a one narrator kind of a shot. So I appreciate that very, very much. But I've talked about this before, but what I didn't realize until I started reading this and what I'm really enjoying is that there are a number of characters and that they all have their own backstory and they all have their own kind of connection. And there were a couple of moments that for me were just really scary. Like I was really afraid something terrible was going to happen to Billy, the young brother of Emmett in this book. And I was just dreading it and dreading it and dreading it. And I realize when those things happen and when I'm really emotionally invested, that I'm really enjoying this book. So that is true. I would love to finish this by the end of the holiday weekend. We shall see. I do have a couple of days off, but again, I am enjoying the listening of it more than the physical read. But I hope to finish this early on in the month of July, and then that'll be my second big book, summer book, and another book of the month club book off my list. So I've definitely been reading that. I can't count it as finished, obviously. So still the same amount of books finished, but I felt like I needed to come in and tell you that. I also wanted to give you my stats this month because I didn't do that last month. So let's start with that. So again, I read 4 books in the month of June, and the number of pages I read was 1,942. However, one of the books that I read is a reread, and while I have no issues getting that to work out in Goodreads, for some reason I can't get it to show up in Storygraph. I'm learning Storygraph. Some of it is a little tricky for me now and again. So it's only showing out to you all and to me in some ways that I read 3 books this month, but I know that I reread one, and so we'll talk about that in a minute. My books had a combination of moods: funny, mysterious, adventurous, emotional, reflective, and hopeful. My pace was medium through the entire month. It felt longer on some than others, but I rated it still a medium. I plugged through some. My page number counts were between 300 and 499. So all of my books were bigger books this month. 300 isn't terribly big, but most of them were fairly big. And I read all fiction, as I mentioned. My genres, two of the books I read this month were sci-fi, which is not usual for me. So that was fun. And one was an LGBTQIA plus, one a mystery, one historical fantasy for one, and contemporary as well. Two of the books that I read are books that I own. One book I used to own, but I can't seem to find it anymore, so I no longer do, but I will be repurchasing it again soon. But I did get that one from my library, and I got the other one from my library as well on audio. I also had one book that I started and did not finish, and I started and did not finish it very, very quickly. My average rating, though, was 4.5. So overall, I had a good reading month. And even the one that I struggled through that ended up giving me a bit of a book slump, I enjoyed it. I just didn't, yeah, it just had some complication to it. So last month for a book club, Rebecca at Becca Books and Jams for her Patreon group, we read a book called Delilah Green Doesn't Care. And this is by Ashley Herring Blake. And I really enjoyed Delilah Green Doesn't Care. I ended up giving it a 4-star rating, and I got through it pretty quickly. And I wanted to go on in the series because I really enjoyed it. I loved the characters. It was funny. It was campy. It was a, kind of a ridiculously funny read at times, predictable here and there, but also had some depth to it that really surprised me and that I really liked. Well, readers, I picked up Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by the same author, and I listened to it on audio, which I did not do for Delilah Green. I read Delilah Green on Kindle. Astrid Parker's narrator is Kristen DiMercurio, who might be the narrator for this entire series, but that is where it fell apart for me. I didn't like her voice. I didn't like the way she was narrating the characters. And it may be that this book is very different than book one, although it seems not likely, but maybe. But it just felt like they were all ridiculous and tropey and too campy and just unbelievable. I didn't even care about these characters in the same way I cared about them in the first book. It was like so frustrating. And I tried. I did. I gave it several chapters. And one day I was putting my makeup on, which is often what I do when I listen to a book, and I thought, I can't anymore. I just cannot. DNF. Do I think I'll go to the Kindle or to the hardcover book and try it one day? And will it be different if I'm not listening to that woman's voice? Maybe. And again, I'm sure lots of people love her and she's a successful audiobook narrator. It's not like she was bumbling with words or anything like that. Just didn't work for me. Just didn't work for me with those characters, with that dialogue, I guess, is the problem. So that was a hard DNF for me. I doubt I would pick it up again, truly, which is sad. Then I decided to reread Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. And the reason I decided to reread Dark Matter by Blake Crouch is because it is a series now on Apple TV. My kids have been watching it. And I didn't want to watch the series until I had reread the book because it's been a number of years since I did that. And I also wondered if I would find it as delightful as I found it the first time. And indeed, I did. I gave it a 5-star the first time. I gave it a 5-star the second time. This book is a story about a man named Jason Dessen, who is from the city of Chicago. And one night he is having a normal evening with his wife and his son in his kitchen. And they're talking about a number of things, including work or not work, and the way that the boy is growing up and just enjoying the meal that they're about to have, when somehow, I can't quite recall how, he finds out that an old friend of his from college is in town, and he's been speaking that day, and he's somewhere up the street having drinks, and he might be able to connect with him and just meet up with him. So Jason leaves. His wife's going to cook dinner for them. Jason leaves and goes to meet up with his friend at this local bar. And on the way home, he grabs some ice cream and he's walking back because this is not far from his home, nor is the ice cream store. And he is abducted and taken by force into a vehicle. And he has no idea who is driving him or where he's going. He ends up waking up in this place he's not certain where he is, and he's not in his home, and he doesn't seem to have the same job that he had, and he's maybe not married to the same woman that he thinks he's married to, and he maybe doesn't have the child that he thinks he has, and things are completely different. And how did this happen, and why did it happen? And this is what Jason sets out to try to figure out in this book that is clever, a little complicated, but not so complicated that you can't understand what's happening, filled with some great character development, suspenseful, thrilling. I really enjoyed it, and I am a big fan of Blake Crouch. There's a couple back here that you can see, and I have a couple more to acquire, and I think another one is coming out. So yeah, very, very well done. Glad I reread it, and now I will watch the series. I listened to The Last House on the Street by Diane Chamberlain, or Chamberlain. And this was a book club pick for Krista at Krista's Books and Jams Patreon. Kayla Carter, she and her husband started to build this home in North Carolina. Round Hill, I think is the name of the city, or something like that. And her husband dies tragically while building the home. And so she has a little girl. Her father lives nearby. Her father was raised in Round Hill, North Carolina, as I'm assuming she was as well, and or had at least been there before. But this is the only house at the end of this street, and there's some other houses that are going to be developed there, but she's basically all by herself with her daughter. They're about to move into this home that they have just built. And she has mixed feelings about this home because she expected to live in it with her husband. Obviously, that tragedy occurred. Also, she's just feeling like, is this the right thing for me to do now? And, but she's near her dad, and she starts out to try to meet some of the neighbors. And there's a woman up the street, not terribly far, who lives with her brother and her mother. And the woman is not, she's kind of standoffish. She's a yoga teacher, but she's just kind of not warm and fuzzy feeling at all with Kayla. So she's not sure how this is all going to play out for her in this neighborhood, generally speaking. Then we flash back to the life in Round Hill, North Carolina, of the woman who lives up the street with her mother and her brother. And that life, when she was young, was very different than some of the lives of the people in Round Hill, North Carolina. I do hope it is Round Hill, North Carolina. Otherwise, I've said it wrong about 7 times. She signs up with this organization called Scope, and she's accepted by them to go and canvass Black neighborhoods to try to encourage Black people who are of the age to be able to vote and to sign up to vote, to register to vote, so that their voices are heard. So you can imagine which time period this is set in, right? So we go back into her life, and her name is Ellie Hockley. Her story unfolds, her friendships, her parents, how they feel about this, how the community feels about this, the racism, the prejudice, the violence, the barriers and destruction that is occurring to stop people from voting, and how she is trying to navigate this and to continue to do this without being hurt or a lot of other things. This is their 2 stories. And the people of Round Hill that are also in this novel in both timelines are their role and their experiences are interweaved in these 2 timelines. And I, at first, it was a little slow for me. And at first I was like, I don't know that I'm going to really like this. It's a little slow. I'm just not quite. And then it just kind of went, okay. And I really enjoyed it. And I'm so grateful that I read it. I'm sad that I didn't get to make the book club live that night, but there's a recording of it where everybody was discussing it. But I think in general, it's a very well received book. This is the 3rd, I think, by this author for me. I gave this one 4 stars as well. I think the only reason I didn't give it a 5 was because it was a little slower at the beginning. And, I think it was sometimes a little bit confusing too. But when it picked up, it really picked up. So I really recommend that one highly. It's sad though. It's very, very sad. And this is the one that gave me the book slump hangover thing that didn't go well. This was the one I was pretty sure I was going to DNF to for a while. Project Hail Mary, Andy Weir. I've had it for a long time. I loved The Martian so much. I was certain I was going to love this one. I started it a couple of years ago and just didn't finish it. Maybe a year ago I started it and I didn't pursue it. It is big. It is chunky. Here's what I really struggled with in this book. Here's where I struggled. The technical jargon is so prevalent, more prevalent than I remember in The Martian. This is not a story about a guy, planting crops in his spaceship. This is a guy who's trying to save the planet, essentially. So he is working diligently to try to get data, to improve systems, to try to figure out why his crewmates died, to try to figure out why he woke up, why is he there, what is he there to do, is how this really begins, which is a good way for it to begin. And then he begins to collect data and he begins to remember why he's there, bits and pieces of it slowly. And he begins to discover what his purpose is. And it is so scientifically complex with words that I don't understand anything about, even when they're described. I didn't have any connection to that at all. And at first, I really didn't have a connection to him as a character. For the longest time, it was just him. But for some reason, his character development wasn't quite the same for me as the Martians. And I think part of it was because he was a school teacher in his life before he ended up on the spaceship, and he would flash back to his days of teaching, and he was just, I don't know, he was just kind of a nerdy, weird guy. Like, I don't like the dialogue. There was not enough building of who he was for me. Let's just say that. As I know it was coming on slow, and I know it was coming on in that way so that, you would experience as he did, how he was becoming aware of his memories and who he was and why he was there and all those things. I get that, but we never really got a lot of depth about him as a human being. Nevertheless, he sets out to try to save the world because there's something bad out there. It's called astrophage or astrophage, and he's got to figure out what to do with it. I'm not even sure if astrophage is the bad stuff, to be quite honest. I ended up having to discard most of the words in this book to be able to keep going with the plot. However, at a certain point, something happens in space. He's connected to something that changes it for me. And that's why I finished this book. And if I hadn't gotten to that, I probably wouldn't have. If I hadn't plugged on, I'm pretty sure that I would have DNF'd it. But he ends up finding something, connecting to something. He ends up making some progress. And in the end, it redeemed itself enough that this became a 4-star read for me as well. But it was hard. It was a lot of work, and it gave me a horrible hangover and a horrible slump after. I'm not sure how I feel about this book, except grateful that I completed it. And the last one was my buddy read with my dear sweet friend Berna at Berna's Bookish Adventures, and that is In the Lives of Puppets by T.J. Klune. So this is different than his Wolf Song series for sure, but this is the third book that's kind of sci-fi, and it's very speculative, and they all have queer characters in them, which I appreciate, and I really, really am a fan of T.J. Klune's. Let me hold it with this hand for some reason. So I didn't love The House on the Cerulean Sea as much as I loved the second one, which is Under the Whispering Door, and then this one, In the Lives of Puppets, is probably my second favorite of those three. And then, of course, he has another one coming out. This one is sort of a Pinocchio-y kind of retelling, but also has its own blend of stuff for sure. Victor is a young man who is a human. His father is Geo, who is a robotic kind of a person and has a bit more humanity to him than other robots do. He also has his friends Rambo, who is essentially a robotic Roomba, who talks and is kind of young and naive and funny. And then Nurse Ratched, Ratched, which stands for something I can't recall. And she is a larger machine, and she makes sure that they are medically well and that if they're malfunctioning, that she can help them. And she's very funny as well, and also very kind of showy. And I don't know, I think that those two characters are my favorite, even though I loved Vic and I loved Geo and I loved the other character that comes later. But yeah, but nevertheless, Victor and Nurse Ratched and Rambo are in this kind of dump area looking for some scrap metal for Victor to create something, because he's very creative and very skilled scientifically, as is his father. And they find an old machine, an old robot that is partially still alive, but is buried deep beneath this stuff. And I'm not going to tell you more than that, except to say that things unfold, and some of them are things that you don't want to happen, and some of them are things that you really are rooting for. In the end, I was just really stunned by this, and it was quite a ride. It was quite a story. It really kept me going, and I'm really happy that we read it. And this was a special edition. I don't know if they're all like this, but it has some extra things at the end. So it has some extra instruction booklets about the Roomba robot, and about something else too. And it's sort of an extra little story at the end. And I'm just really happy that I read it. So I will say that I did a combination of Kindle from my library and this physical copy to read this, because I'm trying to take the Kindle if I can, just, when I'm not needing to carry a big book. So that also had the extra things too. So I'm not sure it's just the Barnes and Noble exclusive edition that carries them, but I was just happy that that little extra content was in the end. So if you've not read this, I would recommend this one. And of course, it has beautiful sprayed edges with little robotic gears. And it was just such a surprise. I wasn't certain I was going to like this one when I went in, but I really, really did. Okay, readers, that is it for my June reading wrap up. Again, that was pretty quick, wasn't it? I am looking forward to Somewhere Beyond the Sea, which is the sequel to Cerulean Sea that comes out this September. And I probably will read another Andy Weir. I just don't know that I will anytime soon. I will read another Diane Chamberlain. I have one here that I shared with you earlier a couple of months ago, maybe a month ago, that was on my backlist that I got from a little free library or somewhere, The Dream Daughter. So I'd like to read that soon. I don't know if it will be in July, but Blake Crouch, like I said, he's a winner all the time for me. I really, really appreciate his writing style, and the more he writes, the happier I'll be. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you read in the month of June. Let me know if any of these have caught your eye or have been read by you, and what you thought of them as well. And as always, happy reading. Bye.